We begin our service remembering Jan as we look into the book of Psalms for comfort. There it is written, Asayinai el heharim, me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. Behold, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. Adonai yishmor tzetecha uvoecha me'ata ve'ad olam. May the Eternal guard your soul in your going and your coming, now and forevermore. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, benot desha yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yinachaleni. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You make me lie down in green pastures. You lead me beside still waters. You restore my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. With rod and staff you comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Eternal forever. For our beloved Jan, we read from the book of Proverbs. A woman of valor, who can find? Her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and nothing shall he lack. She renders him good and not evil all the days of her life. She opens her hand to the needy and extends her hand to the poor. She is robed in strength and dignity and cheerfully faces whatever may come. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness. She tends to the affairs of her household and eats not the bread of idleness. Her children come forward and bless her. Her husband too, and he praises her. Many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty short-lived, but a God-revering woman is much to be praised. Place before her the fruit of her hands. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. Death has summoned our beloved Jan Harrill. Our souls cry out unto you, O God. What are we? Are we the creatures of dust, whose destiny is but to return to the dust from which we came? The ancient sage has taught us, the spirit of the human being is the lamp of the Eternal. Not even the darkness of death can extinguish the light which the Eternal has kindled in the sanctuary of the human soul. Therefore, O God, we thank you in this solemn hour for that which was deathless in the life of our cherished Jan, and which is now revealed to us in all of its beauty. For her love that united us in life, and which death cannot sever. for her companionship which we shared along life's path and which still continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of her heart and of her mind, which brought us joy and happiness and now have become a precious heritage of the Spirit. For all these and more, we give you our praise. Grant unto us, O God, the strength of all the generations of our people who in the face of bereavement proclaimed, Adonai Natan, v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. God has given, God has taken away. Still, blessed be the name of God. The Talmud, the sacred literature of our tradition, takes great pains to describe the significance of a teacher of small children. There we are instructed, teachers of small children should be appointed in each and every land, in each and every region, and in each and every village. And the quality of the teacher is also specified. It is only proper to select a teacher who is God-fearing, teaches them at a good pace, and instructs them carefully. I first met Jan as a teacher of small children in our temple religious school. She instructed the kindergarten class at the Temple Tifereth Israel for about 15 years. As a God-fearing woman, she was conscientious and generous of spirit, sharing her knowledge and her joyfulness with the students and with other teachers. And she instructed them at a good pace, instilling in them the fundamentals of Jewish living through her stories and her creative projects. And she did all this with great care, carefully. Jan was not just a teacher of small children. She adored them, and her enthusiasm permeated her classroom. Jan was not just a classroom teacher, however. Her daughters, Jamie and Danny, benefited from their mother as their teacher in the broader classroom of life. Jan taught kindness by example, honesty by insisting on following through with commitments, contentment in the way she found the silver lining in every circumstance. Her optimism and open-mindedness were gifts she gave to them just by her very being. And all the more so with her beloved Dennis, as they created a home filled with devotion and with laughter. What we saw in Jan was a teacher par excellence, not just in the classroom, but she carried the values she taught to small children in her heart, and she shared them with her family, with all of us, her family and friends, and even with the stranger she met on her way. I recently read a Wall Street Journal article in which the author described what it was like to thank a teacher. Flipping through an old yearbook, the author realized that this teacher had set him on his writing career because of her love of words, and he phoned her to tell her so. While he assumed that she had heard the thank you many times over from her students, he learned that he was the first to go out of his way to do so. So on behalf of all the students whose foundation in life was set on a goodly and godly course, because Jan taught them on Sunday mornings in our temple, and from all the students whose lives she nurtured through her teaching in the Jewish Community Center preschool, and from all the children in South Yucca Lyndhurst schools with special needs, and their parents whose lives were made better because of Jan's kindness and determination, we extend to our beloved Jan a most heartfelt thank you Thank you for being the kind of teacher who made a difference in each child's life. The kindness and caring that she put out into the universe seemed to magnetically be drawn back to her in this last year and a half as family and friends returned to help support Jan and to sustain her spirit. Jan's spirit was nurtured in her home, where she was the eldest child of Arlene and Gary Spector. From an early age, it was apparent that Jan was creative, so much so that she could come up with some very creative explanations for some of her behaviors. With her independent and her strong-minded spirit, Jan could sometimes be a challenge. But over the years, as the tables turned, she remained a devoted daughter to her mother and to her father. Even during your years in Florida, she was the one to make sure to come down to see you and to bring you up for special occasions. Jen was also a good big sister. Steve was 2 years younger than she, and then Laura 5 years difference, and Cheryl 6 years. Through the years, there were periods, as there always is with siblings, periods of closeness between you, and sometimes not so close. But that closeness was especially true of Laura and Jan. Your relationship developed into a friendship. You turned to her for good advice, whether you wanted it or not, and she welcomed Jody into the family as he earned her approval. You taught together at our temple all those mornings, all those years, and your families grew up together. Most importantly, when Jan needed help, all her siblings rallied around her in this last year with phone calls and visits. Cheryl was just here from Arizona to visit. Steve was at her side. Laura was her soul. You each let Jan know that she was greatly loved. And she had a lot of love to give. Both her borderline judgment and her dedication to family were nowhere more evident than when Jan brought home a motorcycle riding man with 2 young daughters. That was love. Dennis, you said that you met at a bar in 1979. We got to put that out there, right? And while you'd park your motorcycle down the street and walk up to the house out of respect for Jan's parents, what made you fall in love with Jan was that she warmly embraced your family, from your 2 daughters to your 8 siblings. Warm and loving, she was the stability in Mandy and Kathy's early lives and remained affectionate toward their families as they continued to grow and bring her 6 grandchildren. Initially, as Jan was working toward her associate's degree, she spent time working places like Dunn Hardware in their interior design area. And upon completing her degree, Jan and Dennis were married in 1981. Soon thereafter, Jamie and then Danny came along. A bright woman with a keen ability to stretch every dollar, she managed the finances of the family and took in children as she watched her own grow up. And when Danny went into kindergarten, she started her teaching career. She created a beautiful life for all of you, literally a beautiful life, because she loved that magnificent garden and tended to it with great care. She became a good cook, using all kinds of new spices to spice up the chicken or the meatloaf, and making delicious matzo ball soup for the Jewish holidays. The only thing that Jan never seemed to have mastered was baking the biscuits. Apparently, she would get on the phone with some of you, her girlfriends, and use the smoke alarm as her timer. But Jan was a master when it came to making sure that you kids were well attended to. She used her wonderful early childhood skills effectively with all her family, but especially with the two of you, teaching Jamie patience and responsibility. Jan was the kind of mother you could turn to as a trusted friend too. And she was a wonderful role model for you as you followed in her footsteps with childcare. For Danny, she was the model of what it meant to be a committed wife and mother. She adored you girls, all the girls, and she left you notes in your lunch boxes saying Illy, I-L-Y, or 143, both symbolizing I love you. Or she wrote it on your mirrors with lipstick. She would do things with you, from taking you to the zoo on free Mondays, or enroll you in reading clubs for a free pizza, and so you'd become good readers. Some of the things that she did seemed odd to you at the time, but you've come to understand her wisdom in your grown-up years, like how she would have fake sleepovers where the kids left at 11 p.m. Who needs the noise in the morning? Or making your friends' parents sign waivers for their kids to play on your trampoline. Wisdom. And you had lots of friends who trusted her too. They knew her because she was so involved in the PTA and was a Brush Booster Club volunteer, and because she was the line judge for years at your volleyball games. She was your biggest fans, yelling out Jamers and Danners, and she recorded every event as the unofficial photographer of the family. Taking her camera with her everywhere, Jan made amazing yearbook collages for your elementary school. With an artistic eye, Jan took it to the next level to become a master scrapbook designer, even teaching classes in her home studio. She also made elegant cards and developed card swap clubs where you'd send other participants blank cards and exchange them. Generous of spirit, she organized for thousands of blank cards to be made for the soldiers so as to facilitate their communication with their loved ones back home. Jan was part of a group known as Random Acts of Kindness that made sure to send each other blank cards, just as thoughtful gestures. And invitations were another of her specialties, put to great use for Danny's bridal shower and then wedding to Randy. Jan got a great partner to share in her love of gardening and decorating projects with Randy. And when it came time, Jan was ready to make the invitations for the baby shower in anticipation of the arrival of Gavin. Gavin became her everything. To announce their pregnancy, Danny and Randy arranged for a special surprise at Progressive Field with Slider in on it too. And from the moment she finally understood that she was looking at a picture of an ultrasound, she fell in love with that little boy. She took so many pictures of him that first year that Jan had to scrapbook a 2-volume set for his first birthday. Now 3, Gavin picked up her good humor and her compassion and would enter her room announcing, "Your good medicine is here." He certainly did take away her pain and brought Jan so much joy. And so many of her extended family and devoted friends, even strangers, attempted to take away her pain and bring her joy as she went from complications with her hip pain to a rapidly developing ovarian cancer. Through it all, she kept her spirits up. Rather, you all kept her spirits up. A sunshine basket filled with all things yellow would cheer her. Gift cards to spare her from having to cook or to celebrate the smaller size she always wished for made her grateful for every kind deed. Friends and neighbors came by to help weed her garden, and they didn't just pull weeds and drop them so Dennis would have to go behind to pick them up off the grass like she did, but they did real weeding and disposed of them properly. So many people pitched in with such love and support in so many varied ways. Jan had one special goal that she was trying to reach, and that was to take a real vacation with her family to the ocean so that she could watch Gavin jump the waves. Dennis's family arranged for a cottage in North Carolina for next month, but the waves of her illness overwhelmed her. Jan lived a short life of 58 years, but she lived those years well. She lived a life that added meaning to so many other people's lives. As a devoted wife and mother, daughter and sister, relative and friend, she made sure everyone felt like family. As a dedicated teacher, Jan touched so many little lives as she set the foundation for their education. As an artist with a keen eye for every detail, she excelled not just in her artistic projects, but in the relationships she held dear and in the way she created beauty through them. We now hold that relationship even more precious, more dearly, as we join with the sages to declare, Zecher Tzadika Livracha. May Jan's memory continue to be our special blessing. Amen. I'd like to invite Jody to come forward and to share a few remarks on behalf of the family.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jody Katzner, and I was Jan's brother-in-law, married to her sister, Laura. Whether you were fortunate enough to know Jan since childhood, became acquainted with her later in life, or if you never knew her but are here simply to support the family, please know how much your presence means to all of us. In fact, I can only imagine that Jan is looking down on this amazing gathering and thinking to herself, what are you all doing? It's a beautiful day outside. Get off your rear ends and get out of here. If you got nothing better to do, go over to my house and help get the weeds out of my garden. It's kind of a mess right now. And if you're at my house and they've put out pictures of me, don't look at them. I hate getting my picture taken, and the pictures probably aren't good anyway. Better they should take them all down and just put up pictures of Gavin. Now he's someone worth looking at. Sorry, Jan, but you're just going to have to put up with this for a little while. As we've been reminiscing about Jan over the last couple of days, I've been reminded of the variety of her interests, activities, skills, and talents, some of which have changed over the years. For example, Jan recently shared with her sister Laura that if she were to start over again in her career, she would like to be a professional organizer, someone that people could hire to organize closets, desks, or other places with clutter. And if you were to visit the workroom that Jan maintained in the Lyndhurst home, where she and Dennis lived for the last 19 years, you would see that she is eminently qualified to do that job, with each item stored neatly in its assigned location for easy retrieval. But even as I say this, I can hear her parents, her siblings, and any childhood friends who managed to get within 50 feet of the disaster area that was Jan's childhood bedroom thinking, how is this possibly the same woman? I'm told that at one point there may have been some incriminating photo evidence of the room you might call the nightmare on Chickadee Lane, but they haven't been seen since ending up on the bottom of the pile of clothes, shoes, books, paper, and who knows what else that constantly covered the floors. Like many sets of siblings, Jan, Steve, Laura, and Sherry went through many different stages of closeness and occasional separation. I'm not sure which stage it was part of, but as kids, Jan would sometimes take her role as the oldest sibling perhaps a little bit too far. It's a little hard to believe to look at him now, but Jan would occasionally like to sit on top of Steve and tickle him until he, and I'm sorry, there's no delicate way to put this, peed himself. The fact that Laura and Sherry were occasionally called in to assist may somehow indicate that this was a period of closeness for the siblings, though I'm not so sure that Steve would buy that. Jan had a variety of jobs during her career before she ended up as an educator. One of the lesser-known ones that she held when the girls were young was that she used to host in-home parties to sell lingerie. Think Tupperware, but for underwear. This led to two small sources of conflict within the family. First, despite his repeated asking, one might even say insistence, she never did let Dennis help or attend any of the parties. Sorry, Dennis, but I guess a lingerie model, you are not. And second, while there was one bag of samples that Jamie and Danny were allowed to use to play dress up, there was a separate bag that was strictly off limits to them because the contents could lead to some, let's just say, uncomfortable questions, and leave it at that. If the job as a lingerie party hostess hinted at her occasionally off-color side, her sense of humor confirmed it. Quite literally, less than 48 hours before she died, the simple act of breathing was getting more and more difficult, and speech was nearly impossible for her. Yet she had the presence of mind, through a hand motion and an almost inaudible word, to make a somewhat racy joke at my expense. Under the circumstances, this was probably the single most hilarious thing I've ever heard, and I'm grateful to have this memory as my last true interaction with her. And no, don't even ask. The joke will remain between me, Jan, and the couple of other people who were there in the room at the time. Jan's sense of fashion and what she was comfortable wearing in public is also something that changed over time. The woman who was once a nail biter became someone who was meticulous in maintaining beautiful nails. In fact, her last outing with Laura was to get sister mani-pedis, as I'm told they're called, and it brought great joy to both of them to do that together. More recently, she started to care less about what other people might think of what she was wearing and wore things that made her happy. She started wearing sleeveless shirts because who cares what people think about her arms, and started wearing LuLaRoe leggings with all sorts of crazy colors and designs on them. Dennis will certainly agree with me when I say that these leggings are a little like taking one of the shirts worn by the golfer John Daly and then putting them on women's legs. Right, Dennis? I truly believe that some of this change in mindset that allowed her to start wearing things that made her happy was what ultimately allowed her to help repair some of the previously strained relationships in the family, and sets a great example for her children, her grandson, and indeed for all of us. And finally, Jan had a long history of creating works of beautiful art by any definition of that word, but often with different styles or with different media. For example, when the girls were young, she used to craft beautiful and elaborate cakes for special occasions, often requiring several different cake pans and even a big chalkboard to rest the cake on because no other pan or tray was quite big enough. She got into photography, using flowers and gardens for her subjects. That is until Gavin came along and suddenly nothing else was worth taking pictures of. It's only somewhat of an exaggeration to say that Gavin has had more pictures taken of him than the entire collection of supermodels who ever graced the cover of Sports Illustrated, and rightfully so. He was truly Jan's heart and soul, particularly during the 19 months of her illness. Plus, he's just a darn good-looking kid. Her creativity extended to the creation of beautiful bulletin boards and incredibly intricate scrapbooks, some of which will be on display at the house this week. But while some may disagree with me, I think the best use of her creative talents was in the amazing cards she would make. To call them greeting cards would not really do them justice because they were literally individual works of art that over the last several years she would send out for birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, or other special occasions. Each card was different and might involve layers of colored paper cut into shapes, images of flowers created from stamps of different colored inks, or paper with intricate cutouts used to make interesting and eye-catching designs. The last card that Laura and I received from her came for our anniversary just 3 weeks before Jan passed away, and it's actually in my pocket right now as a reminder of her. It contained a nice handwritten anniversary note and was signed, "We love you," from Dennis and Jan. Though Jan is no longer with us, I like to think that her card creation days are far from over. The next time I see a sunset layered with many colors, or flowers that look too vibrant to be real, or beams of sunlight passing through leaves and making interesting shadows and shapes on the ground, I will imagine that it's Jan's creative hands, still hard at work, crafting beautiful pieces of art. I will stare at it for a few moments, and as I walk away, I will imagine that art placed on the front of a card that when you open it up simply says, "I love you, from Jan." May the memories we all have of Jan help us through the difficult days to come, and may they inspire us to see the beauty in everyday life. Thank you for being you, Jan, and for the legacy and memories you left with all of us.
Each of you has precious memories of Jan. We take a moment now as we silently compose the eulogy of our own hearts. Yehiu l'ratzon imrei fi, v'hegyon libi lefanecha, Adonai tzuri v'goali. May not only the words that we speak, but even our most precious and private meditations be acceptable unto you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. We ask God to accept Jan's soul with the words of El Malay. Please rise. El Malay Rachamim, Shochein Ba Meromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Kezohar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Yosifa Bat Chana Sora V'Yankel Moshe Halevi Shel Halcha La'olama Bal Harachamim Yastireha B'Seter Kanafav La'olamim B'Yitzror HaChaim Et Nishmata Adonai Hu Nachalata V'Tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava V'Nomar Amen. O compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to our beloved Jan, Yosifa, daughter of Chana Sora and Yankel Moshe Halevi, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us answer, Amen. We join together in the words of Kaddish, the words spoken in our faith, as a way of binding souls together, the living with those who have passed away, and a way of reminding us that we now remember Jan. She remains an abiding presence in our hearts. As together we pray, Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye decho Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba mevorach le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei dekudesha brechu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran bi'alma bimru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael bimru Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael bimru Amen. A precious soul is ended. A precious soul returns to her Maker. Hamakom Yenachem Etchem Betoch Sha'ar Ablei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May God comfort you along with all the mourners of Zion and of Jerusalem. Amen. You may be seated.